Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tamika. This is Library of Tomes, where I talk to you about all the bookish things going on in my life. Today I'm going to be recommending you some books that I absolutely love, but I don't talk about enough. So let's hop on into it. So the first book on this list is obviously Whispers in the Dark by Letitia Newton. I have talked about this book quite a bit on my channel, but I have not talked about it a lot since the end of the year, essentially. I had talked about it quite a bit for Taboo Book Club, and then I also had mentioned it in a couple videos after that, and I had included it on my favorites books of 2020 list, but I haven't really talked about it since then. And I really wanted to just bring it up for people who are really looking for some dark romance that is like dark, like really, really dark romance. So I absolutely adore dark romance. If you all know, I run the Taboo Book Club. That is my book club, my baby. And we read this book in October, and I absolutely adored this book. And this is a captor-captive situation. There's some serial killer stuff going on. And there's a lot of triggers that I can tell you about this book, but dark romance is like one of my absolute favorite subgenres of romance, and this one is just one of the most perfect dark romances that I have found so far. And honestly, nothing has compared to it since, because this is the level of dark that I was just craving when I read this book. So this book is following two characters. We have Alana, who is our heroine, and she is kidnapped. So she's kidnapped, and when she's 18 and she's taken, and she becomes this man's toy. That's what he calls women, is toys. And his son is, she is supposed to be his son's toy, and his son's name is Jacob. And he's just as abused as these girls are. And they kidnap women and they use them until they're done with them, and then they kill them, and no one ever knows what happens, like, to the girls. And this is about Alana and Jacob, and they form a very beautiful, sick and twisted friendship because of the things that happen to her and happen within this, like, in this home. And there are so many trigger warnings for this, and I'm gonna try to list them all because this is just a really, really dark story, and I don't want anyone to go into this if they're not like ready for it. Like, this is a dark romance. Like, this is like so dark, like insanely dark. But this follows two different timelines of Alana and Jacob. The first time that they meet each other, which is when she is in captivity, and then the second time, which is when she has been free and she has escaped her captor. This has a lot of triggers: miscarriage, pregnancy, rape, sodomy to males and females, body modification, but not just like tattoos, piercings, but like cutting and carving into someone and then burning it modification. There is some animal cruelty, but it's not necessarily on live animals, it's on dead animals. There is some pretty graphic violence when it comes to describing torture and the way people are murdered. And there's also, it's not skinning alive, but there is a scene where two of the characters have to skin each other. And it's a very small portion. I don't remember how much detail was in that, but just so you know, this one has a lot of triggers. This one is a lot. It will not be for everyone, but the way I've described this book, it's a horror book with an HEA. Truly, like, horrific in so many sense of the word. But I adore this book so much, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the books that Letitia Newton has written. So then on a complete opposite spectrum of that, I have The Breakup Bet by Kat Carmen, which is going to throw off my white balance, obviously. So I'm going to put this back down here in just a second. But this is The Breakup Bet by Kat Carmen. I absolutely adore this book so much. This is a steamy rom-com. It is absolutely precious and adorable. It is a brother's best friend. So this follows Connor and Lucy. They are roommates now because Connor has just sold a pretty wealthy business that he had because he wants a fresh start. And Lucy is a food blogger, and she needs a roommate because her roommate has just left her apartment, and they make a deal because they need to like a place to live, and they live together. So the breakup bet that they make is they've both went through some pretty bad breakups, and they decide they're going to use each other's methods to get over their current breakup and move on and find someone new. So essentially the deal is whoever's method works the best first ends up having to, doesn't have to pay rent for 6 months, and the other one has to pay the rent for the next 6 months. And it's very cute. I absolutely love this one. This is one where I genuinely was concerned we weren't getting an HEA. I was like, how are we gonna get this? How is this gonna wrap up? It was absolutely beautiful. I absolutely adored this. It was so freaking beautiful and I adored everything about it. I giggled so many times. There's so many funny scenes, and I'm definitely due for a reread on this, and I loved this book so much. I'm honestly shocked that I've not read through the backlist for Kat Carmen. I have purchased a couple of her books and I'm just very excited to dive into them. I loved this book so much, and I don't talk about it enough. I talked about it for a while when I first started my channel, but I haven't talked about it since then, and I just want to remind you that this book exists and I love it. So then I also have the Allen Trilogy by Liz Meldon. This is actually the old edition of this book. I do have the new edition, which I love this cover so much more, and I purchased the other cover so that I could support her, and then she sent me this copy because it is absolutely my favorite thing in the whole world. I love this cover so much. So this is a love triangle situation. This is a sugar baby, sugar daddy, following our heroine, whose name is Sky, and Cole, who is like the sugar daddy. He's like a very wealthy and well-known personality, and he uses Sky to kind of keep people from wanting to like push into his like personal life and find him like love or whatever. And she is in love with him and he doesn't really know, he's kind of oblivious. So he takes her to a party and she meets Finn, who is a very wealthy guy as well. And he has an immediate attraction to her and he immediately wants to sleep with her and have a relationship with her. And it is a love triangle between the three of them because Sky doesn't know what to do. And it has the most satisfying conclusion to a love triangle that I've ever experienced, and I loved this so much. This is a novella, serialized novella series, so all three books are in this bind up, and I loved it so much. Like, truly I recommend this so much, and I really cannot express how like good this one was, and like how good the writing was, and how like amazing the characters were, just because when I first started reading romance, I had this misconception that it was not going to be done well, and this one just blew me away, and it's just so good, and I really love it. And I have not talked about it a lot in a while, so I just wanted to bring up Liz Meldon because I love her. I think she is a fantastic serial novella writer, and I love her so much. So then I also have Eleanor and Gray by Brittany C. Cherry. This is a friends to lovers situation that was like childhood sweethearts to like somewhat lovers to like enemies to lovers. It's very weird. They have like a harder relationship in the second half of the story when they're like trying to get back together, but they're like childhood sweethearts, and they also come back together and she's like his nanny. So in the first half of the story you're watching them as children, and in the second half it's them as adults, and this one is just so sweet because we have so many layers to this story because our heroine is going through grief. So Eleanor is like dealing with her mother having cancer, and Gray has like had his grandpa have cancer, so they're both he's comforting her and trying to be there for her, and they end up like getting pulled apart by like just typical like real life scenarios, like a real life situation, and it's just like the right person at the wrong time kind of deal, which I absolutely love that trope. And like I really love seeing people who like deserve to happily ever after finally get one, and the relationship between these two was absolutely adorable. I think I've only talked about it a couple of times. I really have not talked about this one as much as I should because I really like this book, but I really loved Eleanor and I loved Gray. He was such a sweet grumpy bean who just like, he had some of the like the hardest things in the world happen to him, and his kids were absolutely precious, and I don't really like kids in books, so this single parent and like nanny type of trope really worked, and I just really liked the kids. So if you've not picked up Brittany C. Cherry yet, I do really recommend this one, and I think you should go for it if you haven't. So next up we have the Mr. Kane trilogy, which have I not talked about this one enough? I definitely haven't. I love this series so much. Overall, this is a 4-star series. I think the last book I gave like a 3.5 star. I gave the first book like a 5-star and the second book a 4-star. This one is just so good. It's really, really entertaining. I describe this as like popcorn reading because it is just so entertaining and so easy to follow. It's absolutely so good. It's just so good. And like, I mean, it's not like the most like deep thing ever. There's not a ton of layers to it, but it is so good and entertaining. The only complaint I had with the series was that I felt like the parents were unbelievably overbearing personally, but we follow Candy and Mr. Kane, and he is her father's best friend, and he has been in her life for a really long time, and basically since she could walk, and she has always had a extreme attraction to him, and he has always treated her a little differently, buying her extra gifts, like giving her extra attention, just being like really good to her. And then she comes of age and she is like, hey, I'm into you, and he's also into her, and they have a secretive sexual relationship before they finally develop a romantic relationship. It's so cute. I just adore them, and I want everyone to read this. It's just so good. It's a dad's best friend that actually feels done well, and that is the hardest thing apparently to find, because I have not found very many that I've liked or that I've thought have been done well. So please check this one out. I really liked it. So then I also have the Playground Duet, or the Devil's Playground Duet, which is by Ashley Jade. This is a series I've really not talked about a lot either. This is a really good duet that I really love. It's an age gap romance, and you don't know what's happening because you think it's a love triangle. So we start the book out with Kane and Eden, who are a stepfather, stepdaughter situation, and everyone thinks that they are romantically involved or sexually involved, and they're not really. Eden does have an attraction to him, and he has an attraction to her, but like they aren't actively pursuing that. Also on top of that, we have Damien, who has a history with Kane, and he is trying to take Kane down essentially. And it is a very interesting story. It is a lot going on. There's a ton of triggers for this one as well, following things like a forced water sports situation, very rough sex, very rough violent situations, and there's a ton others that I can't remember off the top of my head. I will try to include them on the screen if I can remember them, but there's a ton of triggers in this, and it's basically Eden is the pawn between the two of these, and she gets a happily ever after with someone, but you don't know who, so you have to read both books in the duet to find out. Absolutely so good. Love this book so much, and I just recommend it so much. So those are all of the books that I recommend that I don't get to talk about a lot. What is your favorite? Leave it down in the comments that you don't talk about a lot, and if you can, leave me a puppy emoji in the comments because I love puppies. If you want to read any of these books, all of them are linked in the description, and I will talk to you all in my next video. Bye everyone.